The House will please come to order. In accordance with Article 3, Section 7 of the Wyoming Constitution and Rule 18 of the Joint Rules of Wyoming Senate and House of Representatives, the 66th Wyoming Legislature is convened in special session at the hour of 10 a.m. this 26th day of October, 2021, at the written request of a majority of the members of the elected members of the Wyoming Senate and House of Representatives. Welcome, members. I want to just say a couple words. This is not in the script, and for the members of the gallery that are here and those that are watching online, there's going to be some adjustments as we go today. Things change. Let's remain flexible so we don't get bent out of shape. That's what my wife advises me. I want to preface inviting Pastor Zach to by saying, that in your hearts as we're praying this morning and doing our work, I just want you to know that Sandy Newsom, Representative Sandy Newsom, lost her mother this morning. And so she has departed, certainly to be with her family. And I would ask that you would keep her in your prayers as we proceed doing the work of this day, because we are a family, and she lost a member of her family. So with that, we welcome back to the house for an encore presentation. No, we welcome Pastor Zach Brechtold, Grace Methodist, United Methodist Church. Please rise with me for the prayer.
I appreciate the invitation back. Before we pray, I would like to share a quick story, if that's okay. One of my favorite stories found in Scripture, it's found in a couple of the Gospels, has to do with 5 friends, really. One of them is a paralytic who has been exiled into the side of the city. Often folks who were exiled in that time were forgotten about. They were left, they were dirty and unclean, and to go and touch and be around them, well, made you unclean, which wasn't a good thing to happen back then. But this paralytic, he had 4 friends. And those 4 friends knew Jesus was coming to town. And they knew, they had hope that if they could get their friend to the feet of Jesus, maybe healing could occur. And so these 4 friends, they go to the edge of town, they pick up the paralytic on his mat, and they take him to Jesus with hope. But they can't get in the door. Much like this room today, the house was full. And so they go to plan B. They climb up on the roof and they start making a hole. And with hope, those 4 friends, they make a hole and they lower this man down to the feet of Jesus. And Jesus looks at this paralytic and says, "Get up, take your mat, and walk." And the paralytic did. He gets up, he takes his mat, and he leaves. And everybody in the house sees this and they know something happened. And yet there's the religious leaders grumbling over in the corner, "Oh, Jesus can't do that. He can't forgive this man." And yet he gets up, he takes his mat, and he goes. And this is one of my favorite stories found in Scripture for one reason. It makes me ask a question each and every day I wake up. Who am I going to be today? Am I going to see the paralytic out on the street corner and be one of the 4 friends with hope that takes them maybe to Jesus' feet with hope that something will change? Am I the paralytic who needs healing? Or am I in the corner grumbling? I have my days. And yet we're all in need of somebody to lower us down to the feet of Jesus. We all know somebody who needs to be lowered down and needs that hope and that healing. We all have important work here today. In our lives beyond this, there's always somebody hoping that we'll see them and lower them to the feet of Jesus with hope. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we come to these moments and we ask peace. We ask that your peace settle upon our hearts and the heavy, hard conversations we have before us. May we continue to ask ourselves, who are we today? May we be those four friends with hope. May we remember that at times we're the paralytic, and may we remember at times we're over in the corner, and may we choose hope and healing. We lift up our loved one who has lost their mother. As she grieves this day, may you be with her and her family. May we surround them with this healing, with this hope. May we remember to ask ourselves, who are we today? May your spirit come upon us and settle our hearts and minds. Bring us peace as we move forward in this day. We pray these things in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Zach. I do appreciate you being here. Please be seated. We're at that order of business of roll call. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Convening roll call for the first day of this special session, October 26th, 2021. Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Excused. Burt. Clausen. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Fletner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom. Excused. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Worf. Excused. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yen. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. We have 57 present, 3 are excused.
Members, a majority of the members are here in the House of Representatives with 3 excused, as announced. We welcome Representative J.D. Williams, who has replaced the unexpired term of Representative Hans Hunt. We welcome him and wish our colleague Hans good luck on his travels. You're welcome to give him a round of applause. Representative Williams, that's the last time they'll clap for you. That's not true. That's not true. Welcome. We are honored to have you with us. The next order of business is the reading of the proclamation convening the special session of the 66th Wyoming Legislature. Chief Clerk.
Whereas Article 3, Section 7 of the Constitution of the State of Wyoming authorizes the Wyoming Legislature, upon written request to the presiding officers of each house of the majority of the elected members of each house, to convene a special session not to exceed 20 days. And whereas a critical situation exists relating to COVID-19 vaccine mandates, which requires legislative action and cannot be deferred until convening of the 2022 budget session of the Wyoming Legislature. And whereas the requirements of Article 3, Section 7 of the Constitution of the State of Wyoming relating to the legislature convening a special session have been fulfilled. Now therefore, we, Dan Dockstetter and Eric Barlow, President of the Senate and Speaker of the House of Representatives, respectively, of the Wyoming Legislature, do hereby proclaim the necessity for a special session of the Wyoming Legislature to address the matters identified herein and summon the members thereof to convene in special session to be conducted in accordance with the provisions of Article 3, Section 7 of the Constitution of Wyoming, applicable to legislative sessions at the state capitol in the city of Cheyenne, County of Laramie, on the 26th day of October 2021 at the hour of 10 o'clock in the morning of said day. In accordance therewith, we set our hands hereto and cause the seal of the legislature of the state of Wyoming to be affixed this 19th day of October 2021. Senator Dan Dockstetter, President of the Senate, Representative Eric Barlow, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Thank you, Chief Clerk. So members, you will note that we do not have a reading clerk, so the Chief Clerk is taking up several responsibilities. And so I'm going to take a few pauses, make some other things as we go, just to give her time to adjust to the next script. At this time, pursuant to House Rule 14-3D, a record of the responses to the poll of the House members on the issue of convening this special session shall be entered in the Journal of the House. Shall be entered in the Journal of the House. Thank you very much. The next is our message from our governor. The Chief Clerk will read that, and I wish I had the ability to allow you to paraphrase it, Chief Clerk, but thank you for reading the governor's remarks.
Dear President Dockstetter, Speaker Barlow, and members of the 66th Legislature, pursuant to Article 4, Section 4, the governor is obliged to communicate to the legislature at the beginning of each session the condition of the state. This special session comes about in the middle of preparing the next biennium budget. That work is not yet complete. Since the special session does not concern itself with the regular business of the state, a routine state of the state seems unwarranted. For the record, Wyoming has done well over this past year. We are coming back. Companies are looking favorably to Wyoming as a friendly place to do business. News from several sectors has been encouraging, but our progress is precarious and we should be mindful about how best to nurture this recovery. This special session, though, is not about regular business of the state. It has been hard to stomach the increasingly aggressive license the Biden administration has taken over the past few months to extend the federal government's overreach into our lives. This timidity is offensive to me, to you, to Wyoming citizens, and to the Constitution that enumerates our rights. It must be stopped. In Wyoming, we believe in small government closest to those it governs, one that is limited by the checks and balances enshrined in our Constitution and embodied in the very nature of our country as a republic. Regardless of whether overreach emanates from Washington or Cheyenne, we are opposed to its interference in our lives. Wyoming citizens have not been shy in expressing their objections to government mandates. We value personal responsibility much higher than we do government ethic. We agree that Wyoming cannot let these federal transgressions stand. From the start, my administration has been active in defending our citizens' rights. You all know that I banned vaccine passports by directive as soon as that notion surfaced. And you know that I have directed my staff and cabinet to spare no effort in forcefully opposing government mandates. I firmly believe that COVID-19 vaccination must be a personal choice. As a conservative and a Republican, I believe in the individual rights every citizen is afforded under both our national constitution and our state constitution. That includes the right of any citizen to run their business as they see fit. Therefore, I am incensed that the Biden administration would have the audacity to mandate that private employers require their employees be vaccinated against COVID-19 and find it unconscionable to threaten to withhold Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements unless mandates are enforced. Using taxpayers' dollars in an attempt to coerce compliance is nothing more than blackmail. Our Constitution was written and fought for to protect our liberties as Americans, not to become an instrument of oppression. The Biden administration's pronouncements on these matters demonstrate its complete disregard for the rule of law and the freedoms that both individuals and private companies enjoy under our Constitution. Our founders recognized that we here in Wyoming hold dear that government must be held in check and be limited in its authority. These are heady times, and it is clear we are all frustrated by the nonsense coming out of Washington, D.C., as well as the continuing disrespect this administration shows for states' and citizens' rights. I empathize with this body's impatience to do something about it. In addition, as you know, my administration has not been idle. So as the work of this special session commences, I want to offer you an update on some of what the executive branch has been up to as it prosecutes its responsibilities to protect Wyoming citizens from federal overreach. As soon as President Biden threatened vaccine mandates, I instructed the Attorney General to be prepared to take all legal actions to oppose this unconstitutional overreach of federal executive power. Accordingly, General Hill has been busy strengthening alliances, refining potential arguments, and considering appropriate legal strategies to stop whatever harm comes from Washington on these points. She has already partnered with a coalition of Republican attorneys general who are working together to craft effective legal action for when the time is right and the target presents itself. She and many of her colleagues have already penned a letter jointly to the president outlining their objections to mandates on private employers. That letter is attached. While General Hill has been working with her peers, I have also been in regular contact with other Republican governors, discussing strategies and preparing other responses to confront this federal menace. We believe federal vaccine regulations are imminent. And just to be clear, as I had indicated before, I stand ready to call all back into special session should that need arise. We are a conservative state with a Republican majority in the legislature and a Republican governor. We strive always to work for the best interest of the citizens of our state. I swore an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States and that of Wyoming. I have done that to the best of my ability. I believe in liberty for individuals and that those liberties extend on how individuals choose to run their businesses. These principles cannot be decoupled for political expediency. To do so, as Hamilton and Madison argued in Federalist Papers number 9 and number 10, would risk the populist demise that has doomed earlier republics. We have seen the same vibration between anarchy and tyranny that Hamilton describes as current democracies have failed elsewhere in the world. Our Constitution is truly original and remarks in the way its checks and balances have saved us from the worst excesses of power and ambition. We have been blessed since our inception with leaders such as George Washington, who rejected calls to replace one form of tyranny with another. I appreciate the challenges you have ahead of you to be both thoughtful and to act urgently with purpose and merit. I look forward to seeing the fruits of your labor and will review them carefully and without prejudice, as is customary. I imagine many of you are also keenly aware of the other pressing work of the state to create a budget in these distressing times and to finalize the constitutionality mandated redistricting. We have a lot to do in the few months before the budget session. Wyoming is a citizen legislature made up of committed people who, in addition to personal lives, have other full-time jobs and businesses. It is because our legislators are not professional politicians that they bring the practical experience to bear on lawmaking, which has eluded so many other states. Indeed, our U.S. Congress sometimes seems to have forgotten what it means to legislate and falling instead into the temptation to grandstand. I thank you for taking the time away from your families, jobs, and businesses to address all of the important issues which confront our state and her people in these troubling times. Sincerely, Mark Gordon, Governor.
Thank you, Chief Clerk. Governor Gordon, Your Excellency, thank you very much. We do appreciate your words, and we take them to heart as we continue proceed today. I'm going to offer just a couple brief comments, and then we're going to engage in the work of the people. The first is, we're here because we get to be. Because the Constitution of Wyoming in Article 2 laid out 3 branches of government and said, each of you do your role. Article 2 did that. Article 3 is the legislative branch, and it lays out our responsibility. In the early 2000s, the citizens of this state amended that Constitution, providing a means for the legislature to call themselves into special session. It has happened 2 times. I think there's only one member on the floor today, that would be Chairman Harshman, who served during that special session. This is the second time that the citizens or that the legislature has called itself into session. The first time was also a healthcare concern, not a disease, a pandemic, but a challenge to healthcare, the availability of healthcare in the state of Wyoming to providers. So today we're here for a different reason. I want to make 2 comments about the sanctity of what we're embarking on. The first is with relation to the tie I'm wearing. Many of you recognize this as the poppies. 11, 11, 11. Men and women died so we could have freedom, and they still do. In fact, Lance Corporal Riley McCullum was laid to rest this past Saturday, a son of Wyoming, so we could be here and do solemn work, do important work. The next thing I'd like to say is everybody in this room has also been touched by the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Either you've been ill, your family's been ill, you've lost someone. We lost a member of this body almost a year ago to the date to COVID-19. Our colleague, Representative Roy Edwards. So I don't want anybody to think that we don't believe this is something that is real and challenging in lives, everyday lives, including the people across the street at the hospital. And we thank those and pray for those who are caring for those who are ill and have lost loved ones. When I came in to be speaker, I said there was 2 things I cared deeply about: the process and relationships. We're exercising our process today, and hopefully with good relationships, we can make it meaningful. And in the end, we'll have policy that serves the state of Wyoming, the citizens of Wyoming well. And as I said earlier this morning to a group of folks, there's going to be a lot of passion. And I had asked that you would accompany that passion with compassion and patience with each other, with the process. I appreciate you all. I look forward to shaking and smiling in your hands at the end of the day, just like I hope I did almost every one of you at the beginning of the day, because that is the work we need to do. Take care of each other and take care of the tasks before us. So with that, Chief Clerk, is there any further business from the desk? All right, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I move Joint Rules 0001, Rule 24, Special Session Rules to the Permanent and Joint Rules of the House of Representatives of the 66th Wyoming State Legislature.
All right, members, I just want to pick up, we have a lot of guests in the gallery. We have a lot of people watching online. In fact, I need to get a count how many people are watching online, because it's always interesting to see how much interest we are generating in the world. Likes, not dislikes and likes. I don't want to know that. But I do want to know, just as a pair of folks, ladies and gentlemen, and this is mostly for our audience, we have rules. The Constitution allows the legislature to set its own rules. And we have adopted rules at the beginning of this session, last January. We have House rules, Senate rules, and joint rules. The motion that was just made was that we amend the joint rules. Now, there will be subsequent motions potentially to amend just the House rules. But at this time, the motion on the floor is to amend the joint rules. Our colleagues down the hall, and I'm going to be a little more casual about referring to our colleagues down the hall, because we are doing something that must be done in tandem, unlike legislation when we're working independently. This is something that's in tandem, that we will move forward until there's a resolution. And if there is I'm not going to call it a roadblock, but a glitch, then we're going to reassess where we are. And we have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D to continue to attempt to do the work, people of the works. So as we proceed, which we're going to start with the explanation of the rules. This is going to be high level. The rules have been out there the proposed rules have been out there for quite some time. We'll take amendments, we'll take questions, we'll have discussion. So we'll begin this process. Explanation of the rules, Speaker Pro Tem Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So members, I know we're all busy. The one good thing, other than doing the people's work about coming down here, is truly getting to see all of you again. It's the reason, it means a lot. My heart goes out to Representative Newsom. With that, I do not want to rush through these rules, but I wish to be efficient. So they've been out, and I'll go relatively quickly. So joint rule, these are the amendments to the joint rules for a mere process. One very similar with some distinctions from what we did in the 2020 special session. So joint rule 24.1A is a general rule that sets out our mere process. There is an amendment to the amendment to deal with an issue concerning the timing of bills. The bills that, according to this rule, we said bills that would only be posted to the LSO website by 5 o'clock. In essence, there were bills that were approved by LSO but did not get posted until as late as 7. And we'll ask for an amendment to change that to make sure that that is a fair process for all who submitted bills. Again, this section was modeled after the rules that we did in the 2020 session. We moved down on the mere bill process. It would go through, same bill would go through each house, but only one bill becomes law, much like what we do, well, not much like, just like what we do with our budget. There is one deviation on these rules from the 2020 session, and that is the bills on the mirror list will be assigned to committee to be heard this afternoon. The committees will have the opportunity to amend those bills, just like we do in a regular session. In committee of the whole, you remember in 2020, we explained the bills, but we did not bring amendments. Okay, under these proposed rules, the bills will be explained. The committee amendments will then come forward and be voted on at that particular time. That's a distinct difference with it. Okay, there is a limitation on speaking for 5 minutes, except for when explaining a bill, which some bills are going to take longer for that. Again, all modeled after the 2020 special session. I just want to say then, we will suspend House Rule 711 or Joint Rule 41, and I'm on page 2. Of course, I have a sort of a provision here, but it is, excuse me, so I can have you all follow me. 24(1)(f). That suspension is a rule on engrossing bills. As you recall, in our regular process, once a house works a bill, the amendments are engrossed in, it's sent over to the other house. What we'll do with these in these mirror bills is each house will vote through with their amendments. And then those amendments or those bills as passed by the respective chambers, the House and the Senate, will then go directly to a conference committee. Okay. The conference committee is again appointed by the presiding officer, and a majority of that conference committee has to be from the prevailing side voting for the bill. There are, I was just trying to, again, fly over this very quickly, and I can address specific rules. And so I'm sorry, I apologize. I jumped ahead a little bit to what happens when we go to the conference committee. Before that, before we go to conference committee, the bill that comes over from the Senate, so this is clear that we understand this. So a Senate file that comes over, a mere Senate file, will come in front of this body, and the amendments from the Senate will be explained. So recall when we do a budget each year, the Appropriations Committee gets up and they go through the Senate amendments on the budget. There's no action taken on that. We just go through to let the body know. Then the conference committee is appointed. The members can go to that conference committee and express their concerns about the amendments and work it from there. Again, the conference committee will work the same way as before. The first conference committee has to stay within the bounds. It is not an open conference committee. Again, I'm just trying to hit the high points for us. The chairmanship rotates. I don't think chairmanship in my 11 years is that big of a deal in a conference committee. What it would do is designate whether it was a House bill that went into law or Senate file. That's the only, and it would rotate with the first bill or the first piece of law that would go to the Senate, with the Senate being the chairman, and that would be the law coming out of the Senate. The second would be the House would be the chairman. There would be the law coming out of the House and just rotates down. And that's all as that's appointed by the presiding officer. Let me see here. The conference committee then would come back and report. We'll vote on it. There's no changes with that. I want to go through some of the things that are suspended as well. If I can get through these, and sorry, it'd been easier just to go read the whole thing to you than to jump through the highlights. So what we've got is House Rule 12-11 is suspended, and that is for reconsideration of a vote, and requires that to be made on the preceding day. So basically, the reconsideration process, as I understand this, is not particularly in play with these rules. The re-referral bills to appropriations is suspended. Although I understand that the majority floor leader will be bringing a House amendment that we'll do separately to allow concurrent consideration by the Appropriations Committee of those bills that do have an appropriation. It's good to get a review of that to make sure there's no conflict with what they're planning with their budget. House Rule 5.2 is suspended, requires notice of standing committee meetings by 3 p.m. on the preceding day. Obviously, if we get a set of bills out this morning and we want to do committee hearings this afternoon with all the folks that are here, we need to suspend that rule. House Rule 6-6A regards the limitation on speech in the House. We can go on, except for limited circumstances, as long as we want. We have that limit. House Rule 7-1 is suspended, and that requires the 3 readings to be on 3 separate days. Now, we've accelerated readings before, and it has not affected the process at all. Bill 7-3 is suspended. Bills allowed to be laid back for an additional day for second or third reading. Obviously, we are here to discuss 3 or so key issues for the state. We don't need gamesmanship of laying a bill back. We need to debate them and discuss them. House Rule 7-4 again is the 1 day between committee of the whole and second reading is suspended. 7-9, all these 7-3, 7-4, 7-9 all deal with the timing and the sequence of the reading. We also, if you'll recall, we adopted as a 66 the ability to participate remotely in the session this last year. That remote participation and by discussion and by design and clear intent terminated when we finished our general session. So one of the other components of this bill is to allow for remote participation once these rules are adopted. And again, that bill is very similar to what we did in 2020, is you have to be present in front of your screen, dressed appropriately and so forth. And I know some members have made a sacrifice to get here for this vote today, and I appreciate that. So with that, Mr. Speaker, that everybody should have had a chance to read these and go through them. I just hopefully was pointing out the key components of that. And with that, I will answer any questions, or Mr. Speaker, maybe go ahead and vote real quick on an amendment to the amendment regarding the correction on the timing, if that's sufficient.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Perico Chairman. Is there any general discussion on the comments before we go to amending the rules? Before we go to amending the rules. All right, we will proceed. Representative Yin. And members, I just want to, and for the public as well, if you're looking for these rules, they're under the legislation tab on our website, under session information. And when you get session information, which obviously this is a special session, there'll come up a tab. It'll be rules and legislative procedures, another tab, and you can pull those up. And we're going to be looking at whatever the motion is for the rule before us. Representative Yin.
Mr. Speaker, members, I move Joint Rule 0011H, an amendment to the amendment Joint Rule 24-1. Members, this rule, as the good chairman mentioned, it's specific because not through any fault of any elected member, not every bill made it to the LSO website, but by 5 p.m. So about 8 bills made it by 5 p.m. on the dot. Everything else made it by 7 p.m., but every member was able to get their bill approved and submitted to LSO by 5 p.m. So you have this amendment just to ensure that every single one of those bills is actually able to be heard, because without this amendment, only 8 bills would be able to be on that docket. So I'll ask for your aye vote and your approval. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Yin. Any discussion on the amendment? Discussion on the amendment. So members, we are voting on, and I'm going to, this is going to be a voice vote. It's a majority of the members present. When we get to the end of the rules, that's a 2/3 roll call vote of the members elected, So we're going to try, we have a list of, I think, 8 joint rule or 7 joint rules that potentially will be considered. Amending the joint rules, excuse me. So seeing no discussion on joint rule number 11 to the House or to the joint rules presented by Representative Yin. All those in favor of the joint rule amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Further amendments to the joint rules. Further amendments to the joint rules. Are there any further amendments to the joint rules? So I have a list of amendments before me that were posted on the legislative website. I want to be clear, there is no one that's interested in bringing forth any of these. We do have, there are some other amendments on there that are House amendments to House rules. Those are not eligible at this time. This is amendments to joint rules. Seeing no further discussion. Representative Brown.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. I'm
Please
just curious. We have the list of amendments available to all the body here. If we have amendments and we wish not to pursue them, would you prefer us to just mention that or just leave it a be?
I think you're welcome to mention it, but I think if you're not planning to, by the silence, I assume no one is getting up. So further discussion on the joint rules. Without amendments, just further discussion. Representative Yin.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I know we're going to have a long day ahead of us, but I do want to speak up against the joint rules, special session rules. I think for many of us, we're well aware that during a budget session and during a special session, during a general session, we have a specific set of rules, and this is specifically trying to change that just so we can get through this, what we're calling an emergency special session within 3 days. However, I want us to very much think about why we have the rules that we have in place now for our other sessions and what the difference that it will make to have these special session rules instead. So we generally don't have a mirror bill process for anything except for the budget bill. The budget bill is very specific and it's very special because it's something that gets essentially 3 months of public debate in joint appropriations over the course of October to December before we even get into session. So you have that period for public comment and you have that period to make changes to a bill to make it the best bill that it can be before we even get into our budget session and discuss that budget bill. When we try to pass laws, I think generally every state, including ours, the purpose isn't to push legislation as fast as possible. The purpose is to be a deliberative body to ensure that we are looking to make the best laws that we can that do the best for our state, that aren't intended to hurt our state. They're intended to make our state better, stronger, and do the best for our citizens. And I think a process that shortens that is detrimental. And I think I try to imagine myself, what would this be like if this was the process for every single bill, right? So if we had this process in general session, if we had this process during the budget session, would we be getting the best work done by ensuring that we aren't able to hear public testimony on the amendments from the other house, right? So this basically kind of cuts out that crossover time where we are able to deliberate as a body, as a full body, on what the other house thinks is appropriate. And instead, we kind of allocate that to a conference committee to decide, okay, this is how we'll respond to the other body's amendments and we'll bring it forth here. So I might come up again and discuss this if there's any response, but I do think that the way we should pass laws isn't to do a mirror bill process for every single bill. And even though this may be an emergency, the idea that we should change our rules to make it so we aren't willing to deliberate this. We've already received public comment from many organizations saying that they're worried about these bills. And we're telling them, you know what, we're just gonna rush them through anyways with these special session rules. So I would urge caution and I would ask you to vote no on these joint rule amendments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Yin. Further discussion, Representative Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, I would also stand and suggest that you consider voting against adoption of the rules. I have the highest regard and respect for our leaders and our House leaders and what they're trying to do as they approach this. I voted against having a special session. Feel that there's nothing that we're considering here that can't wait till our regular session. But that being adopted, we've elected to be here. And I think the problem that I have now is that we're compressing what may normally take us a couple of weeks into what we're going to try and do in 2 days. Last year, 3 days, last year when we had a special session, we were considering all positive things. We were trying to make sure that the legislature was had control in what we were doing with CARES Act money. We were then trying to determine in a manner that was appropriate to businesses throughout the state, how we get that money out to help them. No punitive damages, no jail time, no anything of this nature. And in this session, we put together some draft bills in a matter of a couple of weeks that we would normally consider through an interim, where there's jail time, there's penalties in the millions of dollars to be considered, and impacts on the private businesses that there's no way out. They're damned if they do and damned if they don't. And I think that this requires some time to contemplate. I'm slow. And so when we do this over a period of one day, I may not have the time as I get up at 2 a.m. and think about some of these bills to do that in this situation. So I would encourage you to vote no. I don't want to be here, but if I am going to be here, I think we ought to do it right. And so I'd encourage you to vote against the bills. Let's do it the way we normally would do it, or go home and come back and do it in February. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Larson. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would encourage a aye vote on the rules here that we're about to vote on. We're at a critical moment in the history of our republic. And you look at what was discussed just 7 months ago, the notion that people were saying these mandates were never going to happen on this floor. And that changed in the matter of 5 months. And one thing that wasn't mentioned in the governor's statement and in a lot of the discussion from the media is the fact that many employers have decided to move forward with their mandates, either feeling pressured by the Biden speech or the speech from the chief executive at the federal level, or using that as political cover. And I'm not going to get into somebody's intent. That's not why I'm saying that, but that's the reality of what is happening. In 5 days, we are going to have hundreds of people, potentially thousands, who are going to lose their jobs because of a mandate in hospitals that are already suffering, where the National Guard has been called up to staff those hospitals. We are looking at a severe healthcare crisis if we do not take action. That is in 5 days. So I understand what individuals are saying about the process, but the reality is that we have a targeted special session here. It makes sense to have the mere process in terms of efficiency, which is one of the things that the media has been talking about, which is that it's going to cost $25,000 a day. Well, it is a shorter process. In terms of number of days, it is as complete. There are 3 readings in each house. We're including committee meetings in this. So I wonder, because a lot of these arguments are contradicting each other. One minute we're hearing that, well, this is costing too much money. And then the next one, we try to make it efficient, but still have the complete process. They're saying we can't do that. The reality is that without this rule, it changes the Constitution to where suddenly it takes a 2/3 vote to have a special session, which is not the intent of the Constitution. It is a majority vote. And so this whole thing that, well, there's going to be an adjournment if the rules don't pass, it changes the whole intent of the Constitution. And it suddenly puts a 2/3 threshold on the calling of a special session. And I think that's very troubling. So let's pass the rules. Let's keep moving forward with this process. This has been a 1.5-month process. There's been a lot of work put into this, and people's livelihoods, their jobs, their futures, their families are on the line here today. Please vote aye on these rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gray. I'll just remind members, and Representative did catch himself. We don't mention individuals' names on the floor. Anybody, whether it's somebody you sit next to or somebody in another place. So with that, thank you, Representative Gray, for correcting yourself. Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And I just want to correct a little bit of what was said. So yes, the vote to come into special session is a majority vote. The vote for special rules is a 2/3, but the vote to adjourn is once again a majority vote. So there's no 2/3 majority to not be here. It'll be a majority vote if that comes to it. So I just wanted to correct that. And just speaking on and for the rules, I think what leadership tried to do was provide a short process to do a very few bills to get this done, to not interfere with people's schedules. You know, we're not paid all year long to be down here, and we all have jobs where we come from. So that was the idea behind it, was to try to speed up the process to get back to our calendars and our lives. But that's the body's decision.
Thank you, Majority Floor Leader. I'll go to Majority Whip Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just real quick, on and for the rules, and I'll start by saying I'm here to work. So whether we adopt these rules or not, we're going to work and we're going to do the people's work. And at least that's my perspective and what I'm here to do. And we're going to deliberate over the issues, how you fall on them, how the votes fall at the end of the day is how they fall. What we're debating right now is not the substance, we're debating the process. And with all due respect, I think that the process does allow for deliberation. And even though we may mirror the bills, we're sending them to a committee. So this afternoon, we're going to have public committees. And if you've been in the hall, like I've been in the hall, I've ran into scores of people already. So there's going to be plenty of public testimony. There's going to be plenty of transparency, no different than our process generally allows. In terms of the mirror bill process, I think, the good minority caucus leader actually referenced the joint conferencing in the end. And at the end of the day, this body will have to approve whatever report comes back. And to me, that's your ability to deliberate exactly on the amendments that occurred in the other chamber. And so what I know, folks, is that when we meet, I've been doing this for a couple of years, so not as seasoned as a lot of folks, but each year we modify rules in our session. We accelerate readings because we have such a volume of work to do for the people. We are a citizen legislature. We are part-time, but we try to get through every bill and try to respect the process. And the reality is that when we modify the rules, we are respecting the process because our rules allow for that. They anticipate scenarios like this that are outside of the ordinary, where we have to come in and we have to do the work of the people. So on and for the rules. And again, I think if we defeat these rules, I think we're still here. I just believe that we're going to be here a little longer. So I think that's a decision for each of us to make on how long we drag out our businesses, how long we drag out the people, how long we drag out this process. So on and for the rules, Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Olson. Madam Minority Floor Leader Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Friends, I'm typically really proud to be a Wyoming legislator. I am. I wouldn't be here for 13 years in the minority party unless I believed in us and I believed in our process. I like going to professional meetings. We're part of these national organizations, and I brag about us. There's a lot to brag about in Wyoming. And one of the things that I talk about is, honestly, it follows our recently deceased senator. He had his very famous 80-20 rule, right? 80% of the time, 80% of us are going to agree. He also talked about how he learned his legislative chops on this floor. And he wished Washington behaved similarly. But he learned his legislative chops right here. And I honestly believe that. And so when I go to those meetings, right? And I actually, I'm looking at the former chair of appropriations. I once sat down with the chief fiscal officer of a state to the west, and I learned about their rainy day account, right? Because we were struggling with it at that point. But most of the time, we turn to talking about process. And they are in awe of us. Our colleagues across the nation are in awe of us because every one of us has the right, the ability, the expectation that we come here to do the people's work. Doesn't make a difference if you're in the majority party or the minority party. We do the hard work, and we do it through a deliberative process, and we do it so that it's transparent. We're a citizen legislature. We go home, we talk to our constituents, we have open meetings, we talk over and over and over again, and we do the people's work together, right? We do it fast, 40 days and 20 days. But we have a process where we have 2 chambers, we have open committee meetings, and God knows, sometimes those committee meetings go for hours and hours, if not days, right? We do it on this side, and then we turn it over to the other side with our good work. We get it from them, and we deliberate. Again, over and over again. I'm proud of that process. I'm proud of the fact and what I tell my colleagues, even in those with supermajority states, and I really have enjoyed talking with folks in supermajority states, one party or the other. And again, they are in awe of us that the minority sits at the table and we, like our good former representative or good former senator said, we work that 80-20 rule because we are all committed to the process and doing best by the state. I believe that. I do not see these rules abiding by that. My bragging rights for Wyoming with these rules are out the door. They're out the door. I hope many of you go to the schools and do the back to school program, right? It's really fun. If you haven't done it, you need to do it. But some of the things that we can get are how a bill becomes law. And one of our colleagues here on the floor actually put this out, right? How a bill becomes law, and you have a kid and it's a little snake, and the snake goes around like this where you have an idea and you go through and it's about a dozen steps, right? And at the end, you have your law. You know what this process does? It cuts out 5 of those steps. It cuts out the whole middle of that snake, right? Just has a beginning and an end. That whole deliberative process in that snake is gone. So imagine what it would be like, right? Taking, right, that little handout, that snake, to a classroom and needing to explain what we're doing here now. I can see any 5th grader, any 8th grader raising their hand and saying, why? Saying, what does it mean that you're not doing steps 4, 5, 7, 8, and 11? What does it mean? Why do you do it other times if you're not doing this time? And I say, if we are going to look at these bills and we're going to take them seriously, then we should go through each and every one of those steps, because the steps that are cut out are really, really important. And I'm just going to mention 2 of them that deeply concern me. And one is the limitation on debate in committee of the whole. And I just want to give an example. If you saw, one of our representatives came up for a second time at the mic, I'm sure he's going to come back again. I want to hear from him. The rules for committee of the whole is you only get to come to the mic twice, and you get 5 minutes each time, right? I look at those bills, I have lots of questions. Lots of questions. Committee of the whole is designed so we go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth to hear from each other so that the amendments that we have on 2nd and 3rd reading make sense, right? We're taking away that deliberative process. on committee of the whole in order to save time. We're not doing the people's work. And the second one that I want to mention is that we're not listening to the people well enough. Right? If we follow this process, it means that there are going to be simultaneous committee meetings this afternoon, both chambers. Now think for a minute. You know, there's the talk about having just a couple bills, but the last time I checked, there are 20 bills on that list. Now imagine that you are the prime sponsor of one of those bills. Where are you supposed to be? Are you supposed to be presenting your bill in the House chamber, in the Senate chamber, or are you supposed to be at the committee that you're assigned to, listening to the bills that have been assigned to that committee? We're not listening to the people, and we can't even do our work. So friends, I ask us to vote no on these rules, right? We have a process that we can be proud of, and this is not it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Minority Floor Leader. Representative Ottman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I vote in favor of accepting the rule change, basically because we've been going through this situation in our country for a year and a half. We all know the issues. We know all the different places that it affects us in our homes, our employment, our schools, our hospitals, training grounds, colleges, education, wherever. It already does that. We are called here today to get something done. We are called here to get going, to get working, to find out the very best way, not to prolong it, not to put it off, not to wait until next year when things just fluff themselves out and we're off the hook. We're called to do something today. So I would vote in favor of the rule change. We'll go through the procedures today. We'll take 2 days and work very, very diligently and very hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ottman. Further discussion or amendments on the rules? Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd agree with everything the previous speaker just said. I think the question before us, though, is on the rules change. Is this important enough for the state? And a majority of you felt it was, that we should be here and do a special session, which what the legislature agreed to 2 decades ago, and what we put forth to the citizenry was that we would hold a 20-day special session in the most dire circumstances to do the people's work and do it right through the process that the founders and that we have operated under for 120 years. Is this the most dire circumstances? Yes, I think there's a lot of problems before us, to put it mildly. Are we going to be back here in 110 days? Yes. Are the federal rules on some of the issues we're debating come out yet? No. Will there be a rulemaking process that will take 30 or 60, 90 days? Yes. But I've been told that we're only going to have 3 bills ultimately make it. So we're going to do a lot of work and maybe get 3 bills out in a special session. And I know last year we had a special session that was only 3 days. And that was special. We divided up $1 billion. But at some point when we're back here for a second time for another 3-day special session, they're not very special anymore. This is precedent setting. And I don't know as a citizen legislature that I can come back and tell my constituents, well, we're going to have session in February and March, and then every year we have a special session, but it might be 3 days, but it might be 20. And this is really that second in 2 years where we're getting pretty close to saying special sessions aren't very special. And so I'm perfectly fine, and I know I live in this county, to be here for the 20 days the Constitution envisions that we put before the voters, that we said we'd do the people's work. But I don't think rushing it, getting maybe 3 bills out, having to negotiate the process with our colleagues down the hall on what those 3 bills are, if that's the priorities of the state. And maybe we get along, but maybe we don't. And then I certainly appreciate the majority floor leader and that role, but one person ultimately decides what those 3 bills are going to be in conjunction with our colleagues down the hall. I don't know if that's the special session process the founders envisioned for the state. I don't think it is. And so I believe I have to vote no on amending the rules, that if we're going to be here, we're going to be here for 20 days and we're going to do it right. I think that's what the voters of the state, the majority, demand of us.
Thank you, Chairman Zwanitzer. So members, it's been referenced several times in the discussion. I'm going to take just a personal privilege to ask you to take a look at Article 3, Section 7. This is the time and place of sessions. I want to be clear that the legislature, I'm just going to read it verbatim, at least from my copy. It's the right color, I think. There's several different versions. I know I see a purple version running around once in a while. That's a little bit older. The legislature may convene a special session not to last longer than 20 working days as follows. And then Romanet 2, of course, or Romanet 1 is where we are. So it's not that we have to be here for 20 days, not longer than 20 days. I want to be clear about that if there was any confusion about the several folks that have talked about the length of a potential session, special session. Further discussion on the amendments, on the rules. We're back on the rules as amended. Chairman Eklund.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I would urge us to vote on the rules change. I have watched this floor operate. We can do things efficiently, do it well, get our heads together. I voted for the special session because I believed I didn't have enough information to make that decision without having a special session and listening to what we can and can't do. I don't think it'll take us 20 days. I don't think we need to spend that much time. We've limited ourselves down on what we're going to discuss. If we stretch that out very much, the real tax, not only on us, but it taxes our staff to be able to get done the business at hand that we're usually doing. We've got a biennial budget to set in our short session. We've also got a pile of committee bills that are important. We've worked through those. If this one is lengthened out, then we're unable to get the other business done for the state of Wyoming. So I would urge you to vote for this. Let's get through it quickly. It's part of the process. Trust the process, trust the body, both sides, to be able to get good decisions made. I've seen that happen constantly. I'd say an aye vote for the rules would benefit the state of Wyoming.
Thank you, Chairman Eklund. Further discussion, further amendments on the rules. Further discussion, further amendments on the rules. Now, members, as I stated earlier, if I'm not going to, it's not necessary to withdraw a rule. If nobody stands up and make a motion, it's been noticed, but there was no action on it. So therefore it is indefinitely postponed, those rules that were posted on the website. So further discussion, further amendments on the rules as amended. Seeing none, we are voting on the rules. This vote requires a 2/3 vote. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart excused. Clausen. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom excused. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf excused. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Swanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 37 aye, 20 no, 3 excused.
So members, by your vote, the joint rules, the motion for the joint rules has not been adopted. We're now at that order of business of amendments to House rules. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you all. I will move House Rule 0001 and ask for your favorable consideration. And Mr. Speaker, just a moment. So even though we just failed special rules, that doesn't mean we haven't adjourned yet. And so if we are able to have any kind of abbreviated process, I think it's really important that we assign any bills to appropriations for the appropriation piece of it jointly at the same time that they would go to committee, just to kind of expedite that piece of it. So normally, a bill would be re-referred, would come out of committee, a committee would re-refer it to appropriations. Appropriations would look at the appropriation piece of it, and then they can make some motions on that, make amendments for the appropriation. So this would just allow that to go out at the same time. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to read the bill, 16-1 concurrent referral, subsection A, notwithstanding House Rule 6-1 during a special session of the 66th legislature held in October or November of 2021, a bill containing an appropriation or which requires an appropriation or change in funds may be assigned to a standing committee other than the appropriations. But if so, it shall be concurrently referred to Appropriations Committee. The Appropriations Committee shall consider and may recommend Romanet I, modifications to any appropriation contained in the bill, or the addition or deletion of an appropriation and any necessary related conforming amendments. Romanet II, that a delayed effective date or other limiting condition be added to any bill that requires but does not provide an appropriation. And Romanet III, that the bill do not pass, provided that the committee report may include a do not pass recommendation as an alternative to any other recommendation made under this subsection. And then subsection B, a concurrently referred bill under this subsection A of this rule shall be given priority consideration by the Appropriations Committee. Subsection C, if the standing committee other than the Appropriations Committee to which a bill is concurrently referred under subsection A of this section fails to dispose of the bill by a motion of do pass, amend and do pass, do not pass, or no recommendation, the report of the Appropriations Committee shall not be read to the body, and the bill shall be returned together with a record of the committee's consideration on the day after the last day scheduled. So in other words, I'm not going to read the rest of that piece. So in other words, if the bill doesn't come out of the standing committee, then the recommendation out of appropriations doesn't need to be heard. And then D, notwithstanding House Rule 6-2, Appropriations Committee amendments shall be considered after any amendments reported by the other standing committee. So the standing committee, when it comes to the floor in committee of the whole, their amendment would be up first. Appropriations would be second, which is very similar to what we have now. And so, Mr. Speaker, I guess my concern with the original special rules was we were going to bypass the appropriation process. Being a former appropriator, I certainly didn't believe in that. And even if we have, even if we don't have special rules, if we go to something else, this just will allow us a little way to expedite the process. So, Mr. Speaker, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Majority Floor Leader. Discussion on the amendment. Discussion on the amendment. Madam Minority Floor Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and I think against this rule. We just voted down the special rules. And I'm going to say that we voted them down because of a desire of at least a third of the body for a complete deliberative process. What this does is it kind of picks and chooses, and it's picking out the element of simultaneously having a bill go to the Appropriations Committee. I too served on a good committee number 2. Honestly, it's a committee with a lot of power. We all know that. by allowing for bills to be sent to appropriations before a bill finishes in the policy committee, it gives appropriations even more power in order to consider the policy implications and not just the money. The policy committee looks at both and makes a determination of that money that then gets sent to the appropriations committee. I think that's the correct process. It's the correct process. And what this does is it bypasses that process by having appropriations getting the bill at the same time. And so I think I'm on and against.
Thank you. Further discussion. Speaker Pro Tem Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just you know, we are a citizen legislature and we all have jobs and family that always get pushed to the back burner. But we all have taken an oath to serve the people in our districts, our hometowns, our friends. We listen to them, and that's why we're down here. Okay, I said this earlier, but think about the last 18 months. Is there a friend or a family member that you haven't seen for a couple of days that you sat down with and you visited with them, and the only discussion that you had, or the first discussion, the primary discussion, dealt with COVID-19? Okay, it's a crazy mess, and people are on far, far extremes of their views on this. Okay, we are the people's branch of government. So we're here to try to have this discussion, this debate for the people we represent. I think it's important that we have this debate. Is it premature on some issues? Yes, it might be. We'll be back in February. Are we almost too late on other issues? Yes, we're almost too late on other issues. One that's very near and dear to my district, as a matter of fact. This, if we can find reason to be able to get back to our businesses, to our families, we need to explore. Initially, I was without the mirror rules, I was just going to vote for adjournment and go back to my business, which I'm in about the busiest time of the year with. But I ran for this office, so I have another obligation there. Your leadership's going to try to find a path forward to have this debate. There's three main topics that are out there, really, that we're dealing with: private mandates, federal mandates, passports. We're going to find a way that we can take these issues and not other issues, not the other issues that have all of our constituents worked up and mad, but these three issues that we can come together and have a meaningful debate for the citizens of the state of Wyoming. Okay, so we're going to work hard to try to still make that happen, despite this last vote. What our majority floor leader is bringing forward is a process to help us with that. The Appropriations Committee, when you read, and I'm just going to say this, it was a heck of a lot easier for me to read 20 bills and understand 20 bills than the 600 bill drafts that I dealt with back at the general session. So I read all the bills. I understand them. I see the money. And when you look at the funds that are in there, some of those funds are tied to federal funds. Okay, funds that have been worked through the executive branch, funds that our Appropriations Committee is trying to figure how to steer us through as the state of Wyoming. I think it's very important we have this discussion. We can have the policy side of this, but at the same time, it is very good that we help accelerate the process so the discussion could be had, so we don't become a professional legislature, so we can get back home and do our jobs, but also let the Appropriations Committee take a look at it and go, oh, you know what, there's a problem here because these funds are double committed or triple committed. Here's another fund that we ought to look at. That's all our majority floor leaders trying to do with this amendment, is still help us move forward with a meaningful discussion and still do that in a way that the Appropriations Committee can make sure we're not drawing money out of the wrong pot. So I'd encourage an aye vote.
Thank you. Further discussion. Further discussion on the amendment. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just want to make sure I understand. A do not pass from the Appropriations Committee, according to this rules, is it the same as a regular session where it still continues based on the original committee's recommendation? Or does the bill not proceed to the Committee of the Whole list if the Appropriations Committee has referred the bill and decides to go in a do not pass direction? Thank you.
So that was a question. I'm going to take it back to the originator of the motion, bringer of the motion. So further discussion on this motion, or questions. I'm kind of going to run this like a second reading or third reading. So 2 times one. So further discussion for the first time on this motion. First time on this motion. First time on this motion. Second time to the bringer.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. No, in fact, this reverts back just to like it is in a regular session. That do not pass is a recommendation out of the body. It's not an amendment. It's just a recommendation. On a re-referral during the regular session, appropriations can't pocket a bill. And so in this process, they would not be able to either. They could just provide a recommendation.
Okay, members, we're voting on amendment to the rules. Amendment HR 001. And this is also, this is a 2/3 vote to amend the House rules with the amendment as presented. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart excused. Burt. Clausen. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom excused. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf excused. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Burt? Burt, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 49 aye, 8 no, 3 excused.
By your vote, House Rule number 1 amendment has been adopted. And I should do the let Representative Williams. I want to say 2 things. One, you've noticed the roll call order has changed. There's a couple different names, and then we have 2 hyphenated names right in a row. We split the Williamses, so there wasn't Williams like we have Larson. But anyway, the chief clerk is going to still work on that 2 hyphenated names in a row, so we'll get there. The second thing is for Representative Williams, at the end of the roll, you'll note that the chief clerk announces that anybody would like to change their vote. That is not only to change their vote, but in case you got caught behind the bar or coming out of the hallway or something, this vote is still open. So you can either change your vote or you can initially vote from absent to aye or no. So I say that maybe for the audience as well, but also for our newest member. I know our LSO did a good job and our chief clerk did a good job, but for the audience at large, Just a brief explanation. So we have adopted that rule. Next rule for your consideration, House Rule 003, Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Rule 003, which is an amendment to House Rule 3-5. And I'll go ahead and explain that with Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
Members, very simply put, this is a rule to allow remote participation during special session. It'd be a House rule, so it allows us, if we move forward, that we will give that option for remote participation. This is language that we've seen before. But if some of you are like me, having difficulty pulling up the rules online, I'll go ahead and read this to you to refresh your recollection. So this would amend House Rule 3-5, would be members of the House who attend a special session. It's not limited to this one, but a special session of the legislature remotely and with prior approval of the Speaker of the House shall be considered present in person and within the bar of the House, shall be permitted to vote and shall be counted for purposes of determining whether a quorum is present. All actions heretofore undertaken and performed by the House for members to attend a special session remotely and be considered present are hereby ratified and approved. The presiding officers and chairman, while in committee of the whole or standing committee meetings, may determine the appropriate means of voting for remote participation or participants, including but not limited to the showing of hands or roll call during a special session or otherwise permitted by these rules. A requirement to print, distribute, deliver, or sign under any House or joint rule may be satisfied by electronic means. So members, we have several members for a variety of reasons who aren't with us today. We have one with us today who attended at peril of his own health, in my opinion. If we're going to move forward, just have some compassion. Please vote aye.
Thank you, Speaker Pro Tem. Further discussion on the rule. As presented, further discussion on the rule. Further discussion, seeing none. This also requires a 2/3 vote for adoption. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart excused. Burt. Clausen. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom excused. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf excused. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Larson Dan, aye to no. Further changes? Walters? Aye to no. Further changes? Oakley, were you going to change? Okay. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 49 aye, 8 no, 3 excused.
By your vote, you have adopted the amendment to the House rules. Are there further amendments on the House rules? Further amendments on the House rules? Seeing none. All right, members. So we are running ahead of our Senate colleagues. And we also have twice as many people watching us. So I guess we're way ahead. I would, I think it's probably in order now that we take a lunch break. We get synchronized with our Senate colleagues, understand where things stand, and then we'll reconvene. So, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we recess until 12:30 PM.
You've heard the Majority Floor Leader's motion. Any announcements? Any announcements? So folks, we are, and I want the folks in the gallery and the folks online to understand, we are continuing potentially to proceed in doing the business of the people. The special rules we did not adopt. We will see what our colleagues at the other end, we'll have a discussion with them. But we are proceeding like we would. Now, when we had the poll, both the first poll that the members initiated, and then upon their urging this, or upon their vote, the second poll, the constitutional poll, if you will, that the president and speaker put out, we laid out an order of business, and we did suggest special rules, and we provided those to you. This body has weighed in on that, and we have not adopted them. We respect that. But the other thing that we also included in those rules is that there would be a motion to adjourn if the special rules weren't adopted. We will, first of all, we want to get on the same timeline as the Senate, because there gets to be some awkward timing things if we get ahead of them any further or they get ahead of us. So when we return, based on the Majority Floor Leader's notion, we will report to you on where the Senate stands with their actions. And then the Majority Floor Leader will proceed as was outlined in the letter. So there will be a motion to adjourn. Majority Floor Leader will bring that motion. And this body will vote on that motion. That motion is a majority of the members present. I want to be clear. That motion is not members of the House. It's a majority of the members present. If a majority vote aye, then we will be adjourned. If a majority vote no, then we will continue on the regular order. And I, as a presiding officer, will begin assigning bills to committees, and committees will begin their work this afternoon. So you have the lunch hour now. Well, we have a recess, one to get understanding with the Senate for the leadership team, and two, for you to think about how you would want to proceed with the rest of our thing. And we would be under regular order, with the exception of the two rules that we just adopted, under regular order, except for the two rules we just adopted. Are there any further discussion? Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, and members of the 66. After the lunch hour and we've met with our Senate partners, then it's very likely we could call another caucus. That could be a whole house caucus. That could be individual caucuses. We haven't decided, but that could as well be on the table, but that'll be after we get back.
All right, the chief clerk told me to go back to my script. So I apologize. For those that don't know, I get off script and then the chief clerk has to rein me back in. So Chief Clerk, I request that you notify His Excellency the Governor that the 2021 special session of the House of Representatives 66 Wyoming Legislature is organized and ready to receive any communications he may desire to submit. I further request, I would never direct the chief clerk. I'm just telling you right now. I further request the chief clerk to notify the Senate that the 2021 special session of the House of Representatives 66 Wyoming Legislature is organized and ready to receive any communications they may desire to submit. Now, actually, here's two important things that we do need to take care of. I appoint Representative J.D. Williams to the Committee Number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to fill the vacancy of former Representative Hans Hunt. Further, I appoint Representative Mike Yin to temporarily replace Representative Andy LeBeau and Representative Mike Greer to fill the vacancy of the former Representative Hunts on Committee Number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions. Chief Clerk, anything else? That clears the desk. Further discussion, announcements? All those in favor, the majority floor leader's motion to adjourn and, or to, excuse me, to recess until 12:30, please say aye. Those opposed, no. We are in recess until 12:30.